15 minutes of chaos that shook the world's biggest markets.
What the heck is going on down here? I don't know. There is fear. This is capitulation, really.
On May 6, 2010, without warning, the US stock market and futures markets just crashed.
Can't be there. That is not a real price.
The flash crash, which wiped $1 trillion off the value of American companies in 5 minutes.
To look at a price chart, it looked like a kind of runaway elevator.
It took authorities 5 years, guys, to track down this lone British trader allegedly involved in a 2010 flash crash.
Navinder Sarao, dubbed the Hound of Hounslow, has been accused of manipulating the market.
US regulators claim he made about $40 million.
So Navinder Sarao, he seems to be, to all intents and purposes, like a sort of arch criminal mastermind. What they find is very different.
We're in a working class neighborhood about 11 miles from the city center in the financial district.
It was hard to believe somebody trading this size was just a lone trader, but that's where we were.
I think it's ridiculous to say that this guy in this house in the suburbs in England
took down the market?
It's ridiculous.
You know, if he really did, as the U.S. prosecutors allege, make $40 million, 3 people have now said to me, well, then why the heck is he still living on our street?
On the one hand, he was a kind of common cheat.
He purposefully manipulated the markets.
On the other hand, he's this kind of genius kid from the wrong side of the tracks. He just decided to almost stick 2 fingers up at the man and the establishment. And I think everyone can kind of relate to wanting to do that. I'm Liam Vaughan. I'm an investigative journalist with Bloomberg in London, and I'm the author of a book called Flash Crash, which tells the story of the 2010 flash crash and Navinder Sarao, the British day trader who was accused by the US government of causing it from his bedroom. So Navinder Sarao was, in a lot of ways, quite an ordinary kid from a working class neighbourhood underneath the Heathrow flight path. Had a bit of a gob on him, was always very kind of fast and quick-witted, but also a little bit quick to kind of anger. He had this gift for multiplication and for rapid thinking and for arithmetic. After university, he opens a newspaper, and it's the Evening Standard, and there's an advert in there which says, "Wanted futures traders must work well under pressure," which, as you can imagine, is not how they typically recruit, staff at JP Morgan. But this was a job at these kind of fledgling entities that were known as arcades at that point in time.
All the learning takes place on the trading floor among some of the best traders in Europe.
Essentially, you eat what you kill. And that's something really powerful when you're seeking a career where you make your decisions and profit on those decisions on a daily basis.
So Futex is above a Waitrose supermarket. It's about 45 minutes outside of the city of London, miles away from the skyscrapers of the city and Canary Wharf. At first it's a fairly shabby office, which has got connections to the world's commodities exchanges. Now, Nav had this kind of background in computer games. He was incredibly focused and gifted at games like Halo and FIFA. He was able, he found, to sit for hours and hours at a time, just focusing on one task until he'd mastered it. Fast forward, a couple of years, and Navinder is almost like a kind of enigmatic figure at Futex. He has decided that he can't stand the disruption of his colleagues chatting amongst themselves, getting very excited with market moves. So he moves himself to a desk completely isolated where he can work on his own. He buys himself a pair of ear defenders. They're not headphones, they're literally ear defenders of the type that road workers use. To the other traders there, lots of them, wannabe traders, he was almost like a godlike figure because they would see how much money he was making, the size of the trades that he was placing, and it was just a complete mystery to them how he was able to do it. So Nav traded a financial instrument called the E-mini, which essentially tracks the S&P 500, which is the, a barometer essentially of the US stock market. And he's able to build a sense based on his constant reading of the market and his almost preternatural ability to determine whether he thinks the market's about to go up or down based on what's happening and the orders that are entering and leaving the market. Nav leaves Futex in 2008 in the midst of the global financial crisis.
The banking sector bore the brunt of the collapse, with shares in Europe's major banks tanking by as much as 9%.
By that stage, he's in his late 20s and he's already accumulated about $2 million. Lehman Brothers has just collapsed.
I don't think anyone really expected a bank as big as Lehman to be in a position that it's in now.
The entire global financial system is in danger.
We are in the midst of a serious financial crisis, and the federal government is responding with decisive action.
There's governments around the world stepping in to save financial institutions, and this is Nav's, first very big and successful trade, almost career-defining trade. He decides that with market prices as low as they are, eventually the government is going to have to step in and rescue them. So he places all of his money, which at that stage is a couple of $1 million, on this bet that the government's going to intervene and prices will rise again. And he times it absolutely perfectly. He places a trade on a Friday. The following Monday, the US government announces this big bazooka.
Under our proposal, the federal government would put up to $700 billion taxpayer dollars on the line to purchase troubled assets that are clogging the financial system.
And over the course of that week, US prices increased by 19%. Nav had ridden the wave, the entire wave, and he goes from a position of $2 million to suddenly being worth $15 million. And really, that's when he hits the big time.
I'm trying to stack up my paper. That shit will f*** a hater. The only time when they holler is when they need you for favors. See you, these haters are minor, cause this big shit is major. I'll be rocking designers and still designing my trainers.
One of the striking things about Navinder is that he really doesn't spend any of the money he makes at all. He kind of makes a decision early on that he doesn't want to tell his friends and family about the money. He doesn't want to be seen as a show-off, and he doesn't want them to treat him differently. So rather than actually spending the money or telling other people about it, he just keeps it to himself and he lets the dollars grow in his profit and loss account.
I was in the back with the bailers. You was doing fake with the favours. You was getting run down by the dippers. We were the ones with the tapers. You can't go to the ends. Never. Me, I'm there in my slippers.
You would have thought that Nav would be delighted at the money that he's made and his position and how successful he is. But there's something that's frustrating and bugging him, and that is the arrival in the markets of this kind of new breed of participant that are known as high-frequency traders.
So what is high-frequency trading?
Well, high-frequency trading is where the markets have evolved to. So people have written rules that would normally be executed in a human being's brain into the computer, and they trade at very high frequencies because high speeds because the computers and the communications lines allow them to.
They buy stocks just before other people do and then resell them at a small increase, pocketing the tiny profit.
So what's happening is a kind of skim. People are getting scalped in the market.
Well, for Nav, he wasn't so interested in the kind of equality of the markets. He was more frustrated that his profits and his ability to kind of make money was getting squashed by these robots.
We have executed 21 million shares already.
Wow, and we are not even 3 minutes in.
So in 2009, 2010, he makes this kind of fateful decision that he's going to build his own robot that's going to fight back against the HFT firms. And what he was planning to do was to essentially manipulate the market. And after a few, teething problems, it starts to work incredibly well. From his bedroom, he's able to routinely nudge the world's second largest futures market. He could quite easily make $500,000 in a day. In the week before the flash crash, on one day he made $400,000. The next day he made $800,000. And if you can imagine, he lives in Hounslow. His parents' house is worth, $300,000, and he's making 3 times that amount every single day.
Welcome to Street Signs on this Thursday afternoon. A big afternoon as stocks accelerate their slide.
May 6, 2010 is an extremely volatile day.
There is a feeling that the European Central Bank and bankers have lost control of the situation.
There's this index known as the fear index in financial markets, which kind of monitors volatility. And that morning it was up 30%. And Navinder starts to use his machine to pump sell orders into an already falling and very, very volatile market. For Nav, if you can imagine a big wave surfer and he looks out at the swell and there's just huge waves, it's like the dream. It's like a once in a year long condition. He switches his computer on at 9:30 in the morning and he starts pumping these sell orders using his algorithm into the market. In the afternoon, he gets to a point where he's placing $200 million of orders and he's having this huge success. At 1:40 p.m. exactly, it's not clear exactly why. Maybe his mum had, called him down for dinner. It's 7 o'clock in London. Nav decides to switch the computer off. Great day's work. He's made $950,000.
Completely wiped out.
Now, exactly 1 minute after that is when the market starts falling at a rate and a velocity that it never has before.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen.
And Nav is essentially a bystander as the bottom falls out of the market, and we have this, very dramatic event that comes to be known as the flash crash.
The flash crash, which wiped $1 trillion off the value of American companies in 5 minutes, the biggest sudden fall on record, before markets bounced right back.
Officials are meeting this week with executives from the New York Stock Exchange and NASDAQ to see if the issue of different exchanges having different rules played a role in Thursday's rapid freefall.
And over the next couple of months, there is a very deep dive into exactly what was going on that day, who was trading, and try and get to the bottom of this, really what was a mystery at that point in time. The US regulators, a few months later, produced this very detailed report in which they discuss what had happened. Nowhere to be seen in this 100-page report was any reference to manipulation, and certainly no reference to a guy in his bedroom in Hounslow. So Navinder, as you can imagine, is completely oblivious to these investigations in the US. And, he only becomes more and more successful after the flash crash. At this point in time, you start to have the exchange and the regulators almost noticing that he's cancelling a lot of orders. And famously, at one point in time, he gets a letter from the exchange asking him to essentially explain what he's been up to. And he tells them to kiss my ass. Ultimately, it wouldn't be the regulators that would catch Nav. It would be someone more like him, another day trader, who was operating not out of his bedroom, but in a small firm in Chicago, who was back testing his own software and happened to notice that on the day of the flash crash, there were all these weird blocks of orders that were entering and then leaving the market. And he blows the whistle and the information arrives at the CFTC. The CFTC at that point in time has spent years really being the regulator for agricultural markets. To understand and to be able to analyze what's going on in financial markets at a kind of granular level is incredibly complicated. And at that point in time, there's only a few people at the CFTC who've got that expertise. One of them is Jessica Harris.
Can I get like an emissary, like a stand-in? No. The data sets that we reviewed for Nav's activity showed he would place these orders together and modify those orders several, sometimes thousands of times or hundreds of times before then canceling them and not getting hit.
Yeah, so effectively U.S. prosecutors say that Navinder Sarao was engaged in illegal trading. They say that he was doing something called spoof and layering.
Basically, traders will flood the market with the intention of with orders of a certain security, with the intention of then canceling those orders. And what that does is it artificially drives the price of that security up or down.
So after a year or so, the CFTC start to become comfortable that they've identified genuine manipulation and massive scale manipulation. And so what they do at that point is they decide to get involved the Department of Justice. They're the ones that can throw you in jail. They're the ones that can subpoena you. They're the ones that you really don't want knocking on your door. So in February of 2015, a judge signs an arrest warrant for Nav. And at that point, essentially, his fate is sealed. He just doesn't know it yet.
I tell that man don't speak. I don't want to hear that talk. I tell that man don't speak. I don't want to hear that talk. I tell that man don't speak. I don't want to hear that talk. I tell that man don't speak. I tell that man don't speak.
So it's the morning of the arrest, and half a dozen police officers, 2 prosecutors from the US Justice Department, and 2 agents from the FBI rendezvous at a McDonald's that Nav knows incredibly well, which is about a mile from his house, and they discuss how they're going to arrest this criminal mastermind. As the sun rises that morning, they creep through the streets of Hounslow and arrive at this address where sleeping upstairs in bed is Navinder. They knock on the door and Nav's dad answers. He shouts upstairs, and down the stairs kind of pads this guy in tracksuit bottoms and a t-shirt, his hair askew, looking utterly confused. As he's led out of the house in handcuffs, he turns to one of the officers and says, "Can I run upstairs a minute, bruv? There's a football match on telly that I want to record." And the officer says, "I don't think you're going to get a chance to watch that for a while, son." You know, as it turned out, he wouldn't set foot in the house for another 4 months.
Pretty hard for people in this neighborhood to get their head around. This is a real working class neighborhood.
Excuse me, sir, is the family making any comment today?
I'm really surprised, you know, I mean, I've lived here all my life, and I know a lot of the neighbours around here. Everyone gets on, you know.
Very, very nice family. I mean, his dad, not feeling well from quite a long time.
So a lot of people in the markets, and particularly people like him that were on the outskirts, that were day traders, they sort of almost idolized this guy who had made a fortune from nothing and had found a way to fight back against a system in which, you know, the most well-funded and well-connected firms are the most successful. And for guys like, for guys like them, it was almost impossible to be profitable.
Rancho got sat down with the former boss of the alleged flash crash trader, Navinder Sarao.
It can go one of 2 ways. If he's found innocent of the allegations, then he will be the world superstar trader.
The British trader accused of helping cause the May 2010 flash crash spent last night in jail.
They threw the book at him. There was 22 criminal counts against him, which had a cumulative total of 380 years in prison. And the judge looks at how much money he's made and sets bail at £5 million. And, you know, for Nav, who's worth tens of millions of pounds, that should be fairly easy to get hold of.
What's unclear to me is how much money he made. If he's such a great trader, I'm assuming he probably has $7.5 million just lying around.
Yeah, so everybody's asking that question because he was granted the conditional bail, but he has failed to post the $7.5 million. So no, he's still in the clink.
His lawyers start getting in touch with these various investment advisors who've taken Nav's money over the years, and suddenly they don't answer his calls. And it becomes clear, disturbingly over time, that all the money that Nav has put aside and all the profits that he's made over his successful trading career may not be safe after all.
Has he been scammed out of $50 million?
It looks that way, Mark, yes. I mean, it's one of those stories that's almost too crazy to believe. Anyone that offered him a good rate of return, some of the places that he put his money offered him risk-free returns, and he seems to have been kind of willingly, very, very kind of willing to put it there. And Nav, on the one hand, is this kind of brilliant trader, and on the other, he's a kind of naive kid who's never worked in a bank, has no commercial experience, and, for want of a better word, has been duped by these guys.
The bulk of his money was with this entrepreneur called Jesus, who turned around and said, mea culpa, I lost it all, I'll give it back to you when I can. And in the end, the judge decides to lower bail, so his parents have to put up the value of their house and he gets let out.
The British trader accused of helping cause the May 2010 flash crash is free on $7.5 million bail.
The judge in the UK decided that he should be extradited to the US to stand trial. And what happens next is that his lawyer, who used to work at the Department of Justice himself as a prosecutor, flies to Washington and tries to strike a deal. And he speaks to the prosecutors and he says, yes, you could go to trial, but there's a risk that you could lose. And Navinder's a very vulnerable guy. Maybe the jury will feel sorry for him. Why don't we strike a deal?
We saw this guy who, initially we believed to be part of a bank or an HFT based on his trading activity and his size and the money that he was making to somebody who evolved into just, a lone trader or an individual trading out of his house who didn't spend any money. And it was, I think, difficult to see what that motive was for him.
And so the DOJ, weighs it up and ultimately agrees to that. And then he pleads guilty. By the time it came to Nav being sentenced, you have the US authorities having a very different perception of him. On the one hand, he was incredibly helpful. He opened their eyes to how market abuse goes on. He helped them build a number of cases. He was about as useful a witness as you can imagine. But beyond that, he was also so far removed from the archetypal greedy financial criminal. By this stage, he'd been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome, which kind of provided a useful prism for a lot of his actions, his kind of the way that he treated the authorities. So by that stage, the US authorities wrote a note to the judge where essentially they said, listen, he's had enough punishment. He's been incredibly helpful to us. We recommend that we let him off at this point with time served. And that's quite a remarkable thing for the US government to say.
And I think if you take everything into consideration, the fact that he essentially lost all of his money, I believe that the government made the right decision.
So the judge in the end sentences Nav to a year of house arrest. There's a great circularity to the story because that's why he got in trouble in the first place. And obviously, as ever, Nav's timing was impeccable because within a couple of months, because of the pandemic, we were all in lockdown anyway.
But now I'm living that life.
I traced Nav's finances very closely, and over the course of his trading career, he made in the region of $70 million. I would like to say that the hidden twist in the story is that Nav squirreled away a few million and that, when this all blows over, he'll go to a desert island somewhere. But sadly, having looked very closely into it, I don't believe that's true. Nav is penniless, and to be honest with you, I don't think it's made much difference to his life at all. He still cycles around Hounslow on his bicycle. He still plays football with his mates once a week. He still gets a filet of fish from McDonald's. So for Nav, because the money never meant anything, hasn't changed his life too much.
Now I'm living that life.